Hi, my name is Natthawan Teevaranone and my student ID is 6109640059. I am an eyesight student in Faculty of Science and Technology. Today I'll be teaching you about derivative using chain rule. So let's move on to what I'll be teaching. First, let's talk about what is derivative. In mathematics, the derivative is a way to show rate of change. The difference in y over the difference in x. It can be written as dy over dx, which means the difference in y over the difference in x. Or it can be written as d over dx. So, before we move on to the chain rule, we have to know some basic derivative rules, which the first one is power rule. Power rule stated that if you want to derive, remember this is the derivative, if you want to derive x to the power of n, the n will times with the constant in front, becoming n x to the power of n minus 1. So I'll give you an example right here. For example, if we want to derive x to the power of 3, the 3 will times with the constant in front, which in this case is 1, which will give you 3 and x to the power of 3 minus 1 according to the rule right here. Now, this will also give you 3x to the power of 2. Let's move on to the second basic derivative rules, which is constant rule. The constant rule stated that if you want to derive a constant, if you want to derive a constant, you will always get a 0. This is quite easy. So, if you want to derive 5, it's a constant, it doesn't have any variable, it will be equal to 0. The same with deriving 13, it's a constant, so you get 0. And that are the two basic rules that you need to know before doing chain rule. Now we are going to try out the basic rules by this equation. F of x equals to x to the power of 3 plus x squared plus 7. So derive f of x. So according to the power rule here, we have x to the power of 3. So x to the power of 3. The 3 will times to the front, so the 3 will be here, and it will be x and 3 minus 1, which will be square. So it will turn out this way. So here 3 moves to the front, 3, and 3 minus 1 is 2. The same thing as x squared right here. So 2 times to the front, and 2 minus 1 is 1. So you get 2x to the power of 1, which we are not going to write. And 7 is a constant. So according to the constant rule, deriving constant will give you 0. So in this case, deriving 7 will also give you 0. If you're going to derive any sum, all of the derivative of the numbers or the sum will be added, and this will be your answer. So deriving f of x will give you this number, and it can also be written in another way, which is f prime of x. f prime of x gives the same meaning as deriving f of x. So f prime of x also equals to 3x squared plus 2x plus 0. Remember to write prime for deriving. Now, we are going to move on to the chain rule. So, the chain rule, as its name states that the rule does not only have one part, but different parts combining in a chain reaction. So, there are three ways of writing chain rule. What you're seeing now is the first way. Deriving f of x, which the x is g of x. And to do this, to derive this equation, we have to separate it into two different parts. First, you have to derive x, which is shown in f prime. So derive f in respect to g of x. So we have to derive f in respect to g of x. Then we have to derive g, as you can see here is g prime. Derive g in respect to x. And this is how you do the chain rule. Basically, you derive the outside function with respect to the inside function. Outside, inside, outside, inside. So, derive the outside function in respect to the inside function times with the derivative of the inside function. So as I said, there are three ways. The second way to write chain rule is by this equation or this representative. So this means the derivative of x in respect to the x. But the x is inside g of x, right? So we have to do it in two steps. Derive f in respect to g and derive g with respect to x. The same thing over again. Derive the outside with respect to the inside function and derive the inside function with respect to x. And the last way to write this is in this form of equation. This is not an O, this is a notation for saying that inside f function there's g function. So it's the same as this one. Inside f function, see, inside the f function there's g function inside of the f. So f o g, I'll call this an O. This will give you g function inside of the f function. This can be called as the composition of functions. But don't worry about that. Just remember that this means that a function is inside another function. And to do a chain rule, you have to find the f prime of g times with g prime. So it's the same as we have to derive f with respect to g times with g with derivative respect to x. Okay, so just remember that chain rule just means to derive the outside function with respect to the inside function times with the derivative of the inside function, as you can see here. Let's do an exercise. find the derivative of this function. So we have to find the derivative of f with respect to x. First off, we have to determine which function is f of x and which function in here is g of x. I encourage you to pause the video and try it out on your own, but I will show you now. So you can look at this function in another way, where 3x minus 1 is g of x and the whole function is f of x. And this represents a chain rule. So according to the chain rule, you have to find the derivative of f of x with respect to g of x times with the derivative of g of x with respect to x. We are going to do that one by one, beginning with deriving f of x with respect to g of x. So, in this case, f of x is the whole of this to the power of 7. We are going to apply the power rule. So you can look at this as g of x, which is like x to the power of 7. So according to the chain rule, 7 will times to the front and get deducted by 1. So this will be equal to 7 moves to the front, 7, and g of x is 3x minus 1, which is here, 3x minus 1, to the power of 6, which is 7 minus 1. Okay, now this is deriving f of x with respect to g of x. We get 7 and 3 of x minus 1 all to the power of 6. And now we are going to do the derivative of g of x with respect to x. So the same thing here, g of x is 3x minus 1, and we are going to derive that. So we are going to derive 3x minus 1. 3x minus 1 is a constant, so it gives you 0. So this is a 0, so you are going to derive 3x. So 3x, so this is like x to the power of 1. So 1 times to the constant in front, which is 3, will give you 3, and x to the power of 0 is 1. So this will give you an answer of 3. So in chain rule, these two times each other will give you this, right? This is your answer. Or if you want to simplify this even further, you can times 3 to 7 and it will give you 21. And this can be your final answer for finding the derivative of 3 of x minus 1 all to the power of 7 equals to 21. 3 of x minus 1 all to the power of 6. Now, let's try something a little bit harder. So, I'm going to use this question. Find sine of x to the power of 2 all to the power of 2. The same thing as we did in the last question. If you want to pause the video and try it out, you can. I'll just give you the answer right now. So first, you have to find out which one is f of x and which one is g of x. In this case, you can look at this as sine x is g of x, and the whole thing is f of x. The same rule repeating again. Derivative of the outside function times with the derivative of the inside function. So we're going to do it one by one. We're going to find the derivative of f of x in respect to g of x. So f of x is this whole thing to the power of 2. And again, we're going to use the power rule. The power rule will give you this. So g of x all to the power of 2. The same, just normal with a number. You can just think about this as an x to the power of 2. The rule, power rule, so you move 2 to the front and 2 minus 1, which will give you 2 to the front, 2 sine x to the power of 1, which we are not going to write, so 2 sine x. Okay, so we are going to keep this here, and we are going to move on to deriving g of x with respect to x. So deriving g of x with respect to x, our g of x is sine x. So we are going to derive sine x. And this will need some basic knowledge of deriving. If you're deriving sine of x, you're going to get cos of x. Okay? And by getting cos of x, that's already a derivative of sine of x, which is cos. So here, derivative, chain rule. So find the derivative of x with respect to x. We did all of this and we got 2 sine x cos x. And that will be our answer. So deriving sine x squared will be equal to 2 sine x cos x. So that is it for chain rule. It's easy, isn't it? If you have any question, you can ask me and I'll be ready to answer you. Anyway, thank you for watching this video today and have a good day. Goodbye!